We got a homicide, found a body in a cooler.
We have a murder, homicide. Hopefully a once-in-a-career opportunity. Yeah, because you can never unsee that.
When police were called to a home in the middle of the night to investigate reports of a body in a cooler, they were prepared for something bad. But the gruesome scene of torture, murder, and mutilation they discovered was much worse than they could have expected. On finding human remains, police quickly took the suspect into custody. Then, during his interrogation and subsequent interviews with witnesses, the full extent of his crimes began to emerge, revealing the true depths of horror and depravity that we are sometimes capable of. In the early hours of May 23, 2019, police arrived at an apartment block in North Maple Street, Sturgis, a small Michigan town just north of the Indiana border. They had received a call from somebody identifying himself simply as Stephen about a suspected body on the property. According to Stephen, the occupant of one of the apartment units, Wade Allen, had told him how he had knocked his girlfriend unconscious and tortured her. When she died, he then dismembered the body and stored it in 2 coolers in his home, where it had remained for at least a couple of weeks until the call to the police was made. When the police located the correct apartment block at 3:18 a.m., a bleary-eyed Allen appeared at the door to answer their questions. He denied having seen the woman in question, one Kelly Jean Warner, who most people knew as KJ, for several months, although he did tell the police that he had some of her mail and asked if they would like to pass it on to her if they found her. Allen was clearly acting suspiciously, though, and the police were undeterred. They pressed on, asking if they could enter the property to check if KJ was hiding there, because they needed to ascertain her whereabouts. Understandably, Allen was reluctant to let the cops into his house, given the excuse that it was dirty, and asked them if they could return later after he'd cleaned up. Of course, this wasn't going to work for the police, who were investigating a possible murder. And eventually, Allen agreed to allow one officer into his home to prove that KJ wasn't hiding inside. Once in the apartment, the cop did a quick sweep of the premises, checking inside the refrigerator and looking in several other unlikely places that a person might be hiding. But there was one place Allen wouldn't let the officer check, and that was inside the large blue cooler that was sitting ominously in the corner of his living room.
What's in the cooler?
Oh, that's for when the summer comes around. I'm going to have parties and stuff, so.
All right, no problem. Can you open that for me, and then we'll get out of here?
Well, not right now I can't. I want to save that for later.
Okay.
For when the summer gets here, so.
Clearly, Allen was not going to let the cop open the cooler. But since the cooler matched what the anonymous caller Stephen had predicted they would find, the cop really needed to see what was inside. Allen was then cuffed and escorted outside to be placed in custody in the back of a police car, while the officers waited for a search warrant to be issued. The warrant would have taken a while to come through, but in the meantime, Allen began to get claustrophobic in the back of the car. So he eventually agreed to let the cops search his home fully, including inside the cooler, if they would just let him out of the car. Whether Allen had already realized the game was up or was genuinely desperate to get out of the claustrophobic car is unclear, but on receiving his permission, the cops went straight back inside to check the cooler, and they only needed to lift the lid a few inches for their worst fears to be confirmed.
Can I pop it open, just take a peek?
Well, yeah, if you want.
Okay. Why don't you step back for a second?
Okay.
What's in there?
Just stuff.
Okay. All right, let's head out.
When they looked inside the cooler, they immediately realized that it contained the dismembered remains of a female who had clearly been in there for some time. And at this point, Allen was immediately placed under arrest, and a full-scale homicide investigation quickly swung into action.
Out here.
But everything should be good now.
Yep, everything's good.
I showed you everything?
Yep. You're under arrest, okay?
Under arrest?
Yes, you are.
Alright.
Wade Allen had spent most of his life homeless, and his apartment at 229 North Maple Street had been the first place he had ever rented. In the preceding years, he had spent time in a homeless shelter trying to get his life in order. And it was during this time that he had first met KJ, a mother of 5. They had known each other from around 2008 and had been dating on and off since 2016 or 2017. KJ had been homeless too, and Allen had been encouraging her to register at the homeless shelter so that she could get her papers in order and start claiming disability benefits. Among other things, she was diabetic, and she also suffered from certain mental disorders. Allen claimed he had been trying to help her and that once she received her papers and disability benefits, she was planning to move in with him full-time. But as police began to uncover, their relationship had not always been an entirely loving one. During the investigation, neighbors reported hearing arguments from Allen's property.
There was a lady outside yelling, and she was, that other house right over there where she was in the kitty corner part of it, yelling, and I could have swore it was like the end apartment where they all party at and everything, so I just thought it was that. I'd have never, but evidently it was those two that were arguing.
And here's the thing, though.
Maybe.
Exactly.
Maybe.
Like, there was.
But there is so much arguing back there that I couldn't tell you who was yelling at who. All I know, there was a lady, and I couldn't tell you what she looked like because she was in the corner in the shadows.
But in shadow there.
Yeah. And I even was looking. I'm looking because I normally don't let them see me. But they were arguing pretty good that night. And, well, she was yelling. I didn't hear anybody else, but she was yelling.
And Stephen, who later turned out to be Stephen Russ, one of Allen's closest friends, also confirmed that Allen didn't always treat KJ well. In the past, Allen had been charged with domestic violence against KJ, although the case had been thrown out of court, and he was known to call her names, often telling her how stupid she was, and much worse. During his interrogation, Allen also admitted to, in his words, kicking her in the butt, because he was ashamed of her cheating on him. And Russ confirmed that Allen often hit her. So we can imagine KJ was no stranger to receiving physical as well as mental abuse from her partner during the time that they were together. After Allen's arrest, Russ was interviewed by police, and some of the things he said gave us insight into the workings of Allen's mind. Russ had also been homeless and had known Allen for around 10 years. He said they often hung out and smoked weed together, and Russ was just about the closest friend Allen had. This was why, after murdering and dismembering his girlfriend and in need of an outlet, Allen decided to confide in Russ via a Facebook Messenger chat, and then later in person about what he had done. According to Russ, Allen told him that one night he had slapped KJ, and her head had hit the fireplace as she fell. She had regained consciousness, but thereafter had been unable to speak, move, or look after herself. But rather than report what had happened to the police or call an ambulance, Allen decided to keep her in his home. At first, he tried to feed her, but she was unresponsive. So then, as he explained to Russ, he took a blowtorch and burned her breast and vagina, supposedly just to see if she would react. According to Russ, Allen didn't consider this torture, and he only tried it once. It seems that in Allen's twisted way of thinking, this was simply the best way he could think of to see if he could get a reaction out of her. He didn't take any pleasure from it and simply wanted to see if she could feel anything. As Russ explained, after the blowtorch episode, Allen was convinced that KJ was still there because he could see it in her eyes, even if she was unable to move or scream out in pain.
Have you ever heard Wade make a statement about killing and cutting off KJ?
Yes.
Well, do you remember how long ago that was?
It's probably been about a month. He came to me one night on Facebook saying that he was really scared and that he had done something stupid and now needed someone to talk to. He said that he had hit KJ as he's done numerous times, but this time she hit her head on the fireplace, the mantelpiece of it, and that she had stayed like that for a couple days, and he knew she was alive, but she wouldn't eat or nothing like that. He said that he took a torch and would torch some of her body. I don't really want to mention which parts that he was talking about, but
Do you mean that like her private areas?
yes.
Like her breasts and her vagina? Okay.
Just to see if she was still there, I guess.
Russ claims Alan didn't get a thrill from the torture. But when asked if Alan had enjoyed telling him about what he had done, Russ claimed that sometimes he was smiling and sometimes he was scared. So it was 50-50.
Impression like he was getting enjoyment of telling you what he did and what he did?
There was times that he was smiling. There was times that he was kind of scared. You know, so overall, I'd have to say probably 50-50.
After this, Alan moved her to the bathtub, but she wouldn't eat and eventually died. So he then cut her up with a reciprocating saw and placed her body in the two coolers.
Oh, yeah. And cut up.
Alan claimed his plan had been to take her away and give her a proper burial. And after confessing his crime to Russ, he asked for Russ's help moving the coolers to the spot he had chosen for her. Russ refused, but he still agreed to keep Alan's secret. Russ then even visited Alan's house on 2 occasions while the coolers were there, and admitted to police that the knowledge of what was in them made him feel like there was an elephant on his chest. During these visits, Alan even asked if Russ would like to see the body, which he refused, but he still kept the information about what Alan had done to himself. However, he finally decided he had to tell the police what he knew when Alan also started threatening to kill and cut up his friends. At the same time, he began to realize that KJ deserved some kind of justice for what had happened to her, although why it took him quite so long to come to this realization is not so clear. But all of these details came after police found the body and took Alan into custody. However, the tip-off they received from Russ on that stormy night in May was enough to set everything in motion, and within hours, Wade Allen found himself in the interrogation room facing the officers and trying to explain what he had done. During the interrogation, there were several important things police needed to establish. First, they wanted to know what had really happened to KJ and how she had died. But they also wanted to find out why Alan had killed her, why he had cut her up, and why he had decided to keep her in his home in 2 coolers. During the interrogation, we began to understand how deeply disturbed an individual Alan was. In some moments, he shows remorse for what he did and sorrow for the loss of his companion. But in others, he appears oblivious to the cruelty of his acts and the abnormality of his behavior, calmly munching on cookies the police had given him, while making idle chit-chat about whatever comes into his mind. Then, after introductions and the usual formalities, Alan begins to explain in his own words what happened to KJ.
I only bring that to attention because I know at one point while she was making cereal, she fainted and really hurt her head, and it really concerned me. Because a little after that, I started seeing impairment issues, whether speech, memory, things like that. And I was concerned.
How long ago would you say that was? So just for reference, today is May 23rd, and right now it's approximately 4:47 in the morning.
Yeah. For her, that incident had to have happened in March.
Okay, so it's been a little bit ago.
I want to say March.
When you say she fainted and hurt her head, how did she hurt her head?
Well, I watched her when she fell, and when she fell back, it was the back of her head on the floor, and like I said, her motor skills and memory were starting to not be at her best.
Okay. When she fell, you described it as she kind of fell backwards and hit the back of her head on the floor?
Yeah.
Where was this at your apartment
Yeah.
at 209? Okay. Where inside of the apartment did she fall and where did that happen at?
Kitchen.
In the kitchen? Okay. When she fell, did she become unconscious? Did she knock herself out? Did she just kind of stun herself? Did she?
She was unconscious for a little bit.
Okay. About how long would you say a little bit would be?
Well, I would say 5 to 10 minutes, and even though that might seem like a little bit to me, that's a long time for someone to be unconscious.
Right. And that's just, would that be your estimation, or did you look at a clock and have any type of reference time or anything like that?
That's just my estimation.
Just your estimation, okay.
But I know that's a long time for somebody sometimes.
Okay. So this was back in March when this happened?
Yeah.
Okay, has anything happened since March?
Well, I think there might have been some things before she came back. I think she was gone for a while. She came back with some marks and some.
Is this from March of 2019 until now, which is May of 2019?
No, it would have been before that.
Okay, so let's go start from March of 2019 when you witnessed her faint and hit her head and move until today.
All right, because I believe she left for a while, got into a really bad relationship, and then when she came back to me, there was just some things. But yeah, there was that. And then I was trying to take care of her.
Mm-hmm.
I saw like a yellow thing forming in her eye at one point. Then that turned into a blood sac. And that became both eyes.
When did you observe this, or when did you notice this issue with her eyes?
This was within a week or two. All of this is going to be only 2 weeks time period, because it was about 2 weeks after that when I found her in the shower.
All right, so she passed out, hit her head on the floor. You said within a week she had something in her eye?
Then that first week, I know that, like I said,
What did it look like in her eye?
it looked like it looked like yellow pus.
Which eye would that have been?
I think it started in both of them. I had no idea what that meant.
So when you noticed this, let me back up. So when she fell, hit her head, lost consciousness, did she then come back around?
Yeah, just lost some memory of, like, she didn't know how or why she fell.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then after that, you said that you noticed something in her eyes that looked like some yellow pus?
It turned into blood. tired.
So when you say blood, you mean like some hemorrhaging, like the vessels in her eyes, or, well, I guess describe to me what you mean by blood in her eye.
Hemorrhaging might be a good word.
Was it like, sometimes somebody, they might have like broken blood vessels in their eye, so you see kind of like the vein going through the eye when it's actually in the eye. It's not like, because you had said blood sac, so to me, when I think blood sac, I think maybe something outside of the eye, but
It started with bloodshot, but then it got thick with where that yellow pus stuff was, and it became blood. So it was really odd. And like when I say motor skills, like she was at a point where she wasn't able to feed herself, and that really concerned me. I did my best to try to help feed her. So one time I came in, I saw her sitting on the tub, and I tried to feed her this meal on one of these freezer dinners. I have a bunch of those, and it was chili. And she was just kind of like holding it like this, and then she just moving so slow, and there was just chili all over her. I tried to feed her as much as I could. I said, if you need help, I'll feed her. And then like when it came to like drinking water, I eventually started to give her a straw, because like when I tried to pour water into her mouth, there was a few times she would choke on it, so I'm like, this is not working, we need a straw.
when she passed out and hit her head, did you guys go to a doctor or anything when you noticed the stuff in her eye, or maybe her motor skills were a little bit off or anything like that? Did you try to get some medical treatment for her, see what was going on, anything like that?
I didn't take her, no. I didn't know if she could move or get around.
What do you mean by that?
She just wasn't walking all that fast. Like I said, her motor skills were not good. She needed to. I was worried. I did start talking to her caseworker about how she might need an adult foster care. Because before even that, there was issues of bladder control problems. Like on my bed, I got a big old yellow stain for where she peed on that. She peed in the kitchen. Like she had issues with bladder control.
Okay. Before she fell and hit her head, how were her motor skills and functioning? Was she able to get around, feed herself, drink, talk?
Yeah, a lot better than that. Yeah.
Okay, so then what happened after you noticed her motor skills were off, she got the blood in her eyes, and she was not able to feed herself or drink?
That started towards the last 2 weeks, the second week.
Or last 2 weeks of?
Like I said, from the time of her falling at one time.
Right, which you said was in March?
Yeah, to the time that I found her in the bathtub was 2 weeks. So first week was like, I said the short-term memory, the speech a little off and stuff, walking, like her balance was off, is what I mean by that. And so that second week, that's when I started taking on the responsibility of trying to feed her and such. And sometimes I'll take the time to go in the shower with her to make sure she can wash herself, but...
Was she able to wash herself? Did you have to bathe her for her?
Yeah.
Okay. You had mentioned something about finding her in the bathtub. Is that when you found her in there and you tried to give her the chili, or?
No, the chili was a different thing, but I figured she'd be okay in a bathtub, just taking a bath, you know. So I started the water for her. I thought she'd be okay if she was laying down, not standing up. I wouldn't have to wash over her.
She wouldn't fall.
Yeah.
Right.
So when I seen it in the morning, she was breathing, and what really shocked me is when I saw her feet. And it means that she started with hot water and I don't know, didn't have the strength to turn the knob, or I can't understand why she didn't turn it or adjust it, or and I don't know if that was the cause of death is hot water, or if maybe she tried to get up and it fell or something. I don't know. I seriously do want to know what the cause of death was, because I really don't know. I just know that.
Yeah, I don't know either, but I just want to.
She was in that tub when I found her.
Okay.
And she just wasn't strong enough to change the water. And I didn't think it was that bad. I thought she could handle that.
So when you say you put her in the tub, when you put her in there, how was she positioned? Was she sitting on her bottom? Was she on her knees? Was she... You said she wasn't standing, correct?
No, but if she did try to stand,
when you left the bathroom, how was she positioned?
she was laying in the tub.
Okay, and you said you started the water, so the water was running?
Yeah.
Okay, and was the tub the stopper in there so that the tub would accumulate water so she could take a bath?
Yeah,
And did you go back in there?
I went to sleep.
You went to sleep?
I thought she'd be okay.
And then when did you go back into the bathtub? Or the bathroom, I'm sorry.
Not till morning when I woke up and realized she wasn't in bed with me.
Okay.
Was the water still running, or was the water off?
Water was off, so she had to have turned it at some point. Had to have. So why she didn't adjust to cold? I don't know. I don't know. Like.
So do we know approximately when this was, when you went back in the morning and found her in the bathtub and she wasn't breathing?
Eight or nine. Morning, I think.
No, like what date? Like today is what, May 23rd? Yeah.
I don't know my dates. I know I was working at Speedway for a few weeks, and she passed away during my time working there. So, I mean, if I had the employment schedule log of that, that's the only definite thing I can give you right now. I don't have.
Okay. When you went back into the bathroom and she was in the bathtub, was her head above water or below water? Below water. Okay.
Alan states that once he found her dead, he panicked, and he begins to ramble on about how he's been in situations in the past that have left him feeling uncomfortable in scenarios where he could be accused of something, because he thinks that people will automatically assume he's guilty. The police guide him back to his narrative, and then some of the most disturbing elements of what happened begin to emerge as Alan goes into the details of how he dismembered his girlfriend's body. He begins again with the chilling words, "I've seen things I can't unsee."
Can't unsee, but... Okay, so it took me a while to get some coolers. In the process of that, I would run cold water on her until I got some coolers, because I was like, I mean, you have a lot of detective shows, right?
Sure.
You know, so
They're
they
good.
tell you if you keep the body cold or something, maybe it'll preserve it. I don't know. Maybe I'm ignorant in what I'm thinking, but that's TV, right? So I kept cold water running on her a lot.
When you say that, you mean that she was still in the bathtub, I assume?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I didn't move her at all for a long time.
How long do you think a long time would be?
2 or 3 weeks. Like a portion of April. I think a couple weeks.
Okay. Sorry, I got my wife is texting me, so I'm listening. I'm just trying to multitask. And
Hey, the wife, it's important.
How often did you add cold water to the tub? Once a day or
Maybe twice a day.
a couple times a day?
It'd
Just
be like,
ice cold water? And
yeah. I felt like it would help preserve.
No, I'm sure it did.
But not pretty. It's like, I've seen the whole decompensation process. And, because I would come in and check on her, and I know she's passed, but I still talk to her.
okay.
Which probably makes me crazy. Good. I talk to her when she's...
Someone that you had feelings for, you had a relationship for a long time.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
definitely don't think that it's something that makes you crazy. I mean, it's no different than someone who goes to a gravesite and talks to one of their loved ones who's passed. You know what I mean? It's a gravesite, and you know that they're not physically there, but they could still be there in spirit. So, yeah, Okay, so she was in there, run water on her, and you said it took a while to get coolers, so I'm assuming at some point you got coolers?
I did.
Where did you get the coolers from?
Walmart.
How many coolers did you get?
2. I didn't know I needed a second one until after the fact. Like I said, the decompensation process, watching the whole thing, like, first couple days she's movable, right?
Right.
Then after that, you see like the blood kind of settle where she was laying at. And a little after that, that's when I started seeing like black around her fingertips and her groin and waistline. And by then she was pretty stiff for a good while. Because when she was laying in the tub, she kind of laid like against the wall, I think, or something. But even after a while, the stiffness faded away, and she just kind of, laid on her shoulder.
So what happened at that point? You said that you bought one and then realized you needed a second. What do you mean by that?
Well, I wanted to put her all in one so she could be whole.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't really move her in any kind of way to keep her whole. Nothing I could do could keep her remain whole. That's where I really got gross.
What happened at that point?
Well, when I had to get the second cooler, I had to put her legs in that one. And I'm not gonna lie, that was the grossest thing ever.
I guess help me understand how she was in one and her legs were on another.
I had to cut her legs so I could fit me out.
Okay, when you say that, you mean that her body was too big for the first cooler? So you couldn't fit her in the first cooler? And was she too stiff to be able to move her around to put her in the cooler?
If I could move her, I would have had her like knees up to her chest or something.
But you couldn't?
No.
Okay. So you say you cut her legs. Where did you cut her legs at?
This is the most disgusting thing ever. Hopefully you never have to see something like this in your life. Ever. Alright, so here and then here. I started here, but then I realized her knees were still over the edge.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go here too.
Okay. And how did you cut her legs?
I used a saw.
A saw? What? Like a hand saw? Like a
Reciprocating saw.
reciprocating saw?
Yeah. I don't have it anymore, but
What happened to the saw?
I gave it away.
Who did you give it to?
Bill.
Bill.
Yeah. He was supposed to give me a DVD player. But,
We talked about it a whole lot here, so I just want to recap the past a little bit. I know this is a rough subject, but I want to make sure that I have what you're telling me correct. So that's why I want to confirm it with you. Okay, because I don't want to get something in here that's not right. Because I'm listening and I'm writing at the same time, and the story is continuing on. So.
well, I don't know the condition. I haven't checked on her in a while after the cooler. So, like, if there was water in her lungs still or not, I don't know. I know that what I would have wanted to do, except she was too heavy for me, is take her under the shower and wash her off, because after she passed on, she crapped herself, and I was like, man, I didn't even know that until I got her in the cooler. Otherwise, hell or high water, I would have washed her off.
Right.
She don't need to be laying like that.
Okay.
Fortunately, she's heavy.
Okay. So she takes a bath, passes away in a bathtub. You store her in the bathtub so you can get cooler, run cold water on her, keep the decomp down. By the first cooler, she wouldn't fit, so you tried removing her legs below the knee.
Up below and above.
Right, so below first, right, because that we said, and then she was still too long, so then you removed above the knee.
Yeah.
And what did you do with those portions?
Second cooler.
Second cooler, okay. So remove the legs, we're able to fit her in the cooler. Put her legs in the second cooler. Where did you get the second cooler from?
Walmart.
From Walmart also, okay.
I'm not a very complicated guy.
Okay, and then you said the reciprocating saw that you used, where did you get that from?
Walmart.
Walmart. Okay, and then the reciprocating saw, after you removed her legs, then was there a reason that you got rid of it, or just had it and you didn't really need it, or, I mean, how did that whole thing play out with Bill?
He needed it, and I needed a DVD player. I don't have anything for entertainment, really.
Who, removing her legs, where did that happen at?
The living room.
In the living room?
Yeah.
Okay,
Because by then I was able to get her in the big one.
okay. So, when you say you got her in the big one, how did that work? Did you?
She was heavy. So, I mean, I kind of... Well, I want to kind of show it by hand, but basically I just... This hand's getting sore.
Yeah, just adjust that, and it's pretty loose, so it shouldn't be pinching anything.
I just kind of had to lift her up over the tub and then just into the cooler.
Okay.
And it took some effort. And after I got her out, I couldn't just leave the legs over, because the whole idea of the cooler is just to contain smell, the decomp, all of that, just contain it.
Okay.
Because for a while, I mean, odor,
Right.
you know.
So you pulled her up and out of the tub, slid her into the cooler,
Yeah.
and then
So I tried to cool her out to the living room,
okay.
but I couldn't move her. Like I said, I was thinking knees to chest, and I couldn't do it. That's when I said, okay, I gotta get a second cooler.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I just don't, I let her just stay in there, because I knew if I keep opening it, even if I wanted to look at her,
Mm-hmm.
it would just create an odor, and I didn't look at her very much after that.
Okay. And about how long ago do you think that was the last time you closed the cooler, put her to rest, until today?
About the 3rd or 4th week in April. I want to say the 4th week.
Okay. So, going through your apartment, I found the reciprocating saw box that was in there, and it had a date of purchase was April 17th. Does that sound about right?
That's about what I thought.
Right, yeah, we're going with your timeline here, so.
I mean, if I am wrong in timeline, it's not on purpose, but...
Well, I can tell you, I mean, it's a printed receipt and it's on the side of the box.
I did
know
keep that just in case I wanted to return it.
Okay. And it looked like you bought some extra blades, like another blade pack with it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you get those for? Just for the... Did it come with blades, or?
It came with one, but this is gross, alright? A lot of this is gross.
Right.
But the truth is, I need a long enough blade to cover the thigh.
Gotcha. So the ones you bought were longer ones?
Yeah, and it was only one.
Just one?
Well, there's no sense to get 2 or 3.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, I know I'm waiving my rights to silence and everything, and I hope somehow by being honest with you guys, this means something.
It does, and we really appreciate you being honest with us. That goes a long way with us.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not proud of anything at all.
Sure, but stuff happens, and we're just trying to get
not how this should be. Like, I kept saying that to her, like, this is not how you should have went. This.
Wade, where were you happen to Kelly, and you kept her in the tub and put her in the cooler? Did you think that this was a right thing to do or a wrong thing to do, or what did you think about that?
I think like I said, I want to give her a proper burial.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to have her be on display to be ridiculed or criticized. Like, I don't know how people are gonna.
I guess what I'm asking is, when you found her in the bathtub, she was not breathing, she was no longer alive. You kept her body in the bathtub by running cold water on it so that she wouldn't decompose, and then purchased a cooler to put her body in, but figured out that it wasn't long enough, so then you cut her legs off, purchased another cooler, put her legs in there. Did you think that was a wrong thing to do? Rather than finding her and calling 911 when you found her deceased?
Well, in the beginning, I don't know how to make that report without it being, like I said, I've been accused so much. It's hard for me to want to make a report about things. I'm not, as far as right or wrong, I don't know. As far as reports, I don't know if telling the truth or being honest means anything. And when you lose that sense...
What do you mean by that? I guess I don't understand what you mean by that.
Because I feel like no matter what I say or do sometimes, I don't know if I can be in the right, you know, in the eyes of others. I don't know how other people look at me. So, I don't know, I didn't feel comfortable making a report. It wasn't a matter of right or wrong, just a comfort thing.
So would it be fair to say that you felt more comfortable by keeping her in the apartment in the tub and then keeping her in the apartment in the coolers? You felt more comfortable doing that than you did calling the police or medics or something like that?
In a way, I want to say yes, it did, because I kept her company. I talked to her. And when I could, I would put her somewhere decent, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's what you were planning to do? Is that what you mean by that? When you could? Okay. Where were you planning on putting her?
I don't have a place in mind.
Didn't have a place yet?
I mean, as I travel around countryside, I could look around and say, okay, that could be or that could be, but the only thing I thought in my mind would be like a lake with a hill or something. And at least you'll have some wildlife or something. Or spirit could maybe.
How long did you think you were going to keep her in the apartment for before you found a place?
I wasn't really thinking that. Like,
No.
advanced. Isn't that something I just think about, you know? I mean, it was kind of like play by ear, like for example, in the last few days, I think the smaller cooler might have had an odor start to develop again. The big one I don't think did. So in my mind I'm like, okay, now I have to do something. And that's just kind of how it is. I'm responding to a need-to-do situation.
Okay.
It's not like I thought, okay, this is where this should go, or this is when. This is kind of like, this is happening. How should I respond?
Gotcha. So when was it that you called Steven then?
Well, I talked to him about it. Well, had to be the end of March, or around the time of, like, within a week after she passed.
Okay. And what did you tell him happened?
I told him that.
So wait, I want you just to remind you that we have spoken to Steven. Okay, so, you know, we've been 100% honest with each other up until this point, so I want to make sure that we continue to be honest. And if there's something, you know, that we've talked about that's not really 100% honest, now would be, you know, the time to say, okay, you know, I think I might have said this, but I really meant that. That way, you know, we're all telling each other the truth.
I told him about that cutting process.
Okay. What did you tell him happened to Kelly?
I don't know what happened. I think I told him that she fell down.
Did you tell him that you backhanded her and something happened and she passed away?
Backhanded her? No, if he said that, then I'm a little bit upset, because that's not true.
Okay. So wait, this is what I...
Backhanded her? No.
Did you and Kelly have some type of an argument, fight? I mean, did something transpire between the two of you that was, you know, maybe mutual? You know, she came at you or something where you're trying to defend yourself or just kind of calm things down?
No, there was no argument there.
Okay. Yeah, because this is the point where, you know, I'm being honest with you, you're being honest with me.
I am being
I'm telling you exactly
100%.
what came in.
I'm telling you the absolute truth. She was in that bathtub when I went to sleep.
Backhanded her and killed her. Then cut her up and put her in the cooler.
That's not at all the case.
No, not at all the case?
I am being 100%.
Okay. I'm just throwing it out there.
I'm
you know,
a little upset right now because that is.
Well, I don't want you to be upset with me.
I know, I'm not upset with you. I'm not upset with you, but I am upset that he.
Then this is why, we bring these things up, because this is what we're trying to do. Officer Wyatt and myself are trying to make sure we get to the bottom of the story. So an autopsy will be performed on Kelly, and what they will do is they will go through, all medical conditions, everything that transpired. They'll be able to tell us what her exact cause of death was. And I just want to make sure that, you're telling me she was in a bathtub, you woke up, she wasn't breathing, the water was above her airways, and then we get to the medical examiner's office and they say, she got water in her lungs, but that's not what caused her death.
Yeah,
So, I mean, if it's something else, it's something else. It doesn't matter to me one way or the other. It doesn't matter to Officer Wyatt.
Yeah, I don't know.
Ultimately, what we're trying to do here, Wade, is we are just trying to, when Kelly's family or loved ones or other people who cared for her like you did, ask, we can just tell them, hey, this is what happened. That's
I would
exactly
say
what we're trying to do.
for them, say.
So, not only for them, but also for you. So that way everyone has a peace of mind and everyone has a clear conscience and everyone doesn't have a weight on their shoulders of.
Ever since that first fall, I've been worried. Like I said, with the balance being
Right.
off.
Okay.
My fear is that she might have tried to got up and might have slipped back down.
Okay.
Okay. But I don't know how to verify. I'm not an expert. I don't know how to verify that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what the medical examiner will do
And
when
I'm
they do
just
the
saying,
autopsy.
like, the water, I don't know if that was her cause of death. But I know I did shower her a few times, so there is probably going to be water. Is it enough to fill her lungs? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I told you everything.
Okay.
Because.
Well, like I said, I just want to make sure that.
And she does have other marks and stuff, like I said, because before she came back, she left someone that hurt her bad.
Okay.
Okay? And you said that wasn't relevant right now in me telling you this, but she has marks from.
Okay, well, they'll be able to tell us, hey, this mark is this old, this mark is this old, and that's why I worked hard with you to be able to establish a timeline. We talked about a couple days.
After this exchange, the officer leading the interrogation leaves the room, and Alan explains to the other cop how he was once accused of rape. The woman involved in the case ended up admitting she made the story up, but he says this is the reason he is now reluctant to speak to the police. After this, another cop who had been listening in from another room comes in to take over the interrogation. We learn that KJ herself had been in prison for 200 days and had then spent time in a mental rehab. The cop goes through the overall timeline of events, during which Alan admits he doesn't know the exact date KJ died. The new cop then continues with a much stronger line of questioning. So it was clear that KJ had died in Alan's apartment and that Alan had cut her up and placed her body in the coolers. This much was beyond doubt. But where Alan's story differed from Russ's was on how her death had occurred. Alan claimed that she had fallen down and hit her head by herself, whereas Russ claimed she had hit her head after receiving a backhander from Alan. Furthermore, as we see in the final moments of the interrogation, the second cop clearly believed that the backhander may have come from Alan because he had been jealous of KJ seeing another man. But more information was still to come to light. While in custody, over breakfast, Alan told another inmate another version of the story, in which he strangled KJ while telling her, "At least you're going to die by someone who loves you." Giving the information to the police, this new witness told how Alan said he had choked her for 5 minutes while making her watch the clock before leaving to get a snack. He then came back to find she was dead.
Well, I tell you, in your statement it says today is Friday, September 25th, 2020. I'm currently locked up in St. Joe County Jail with Wade Allen and C Cell, C Block. At breakfast this morning, Wade Allen told myself and 3 others how he tortured his poor wife/girlfriend with multiple different things. It's gruesome and totally and morbidly wrong.
The witness also told how Alan, with a smile on his face, talked about how he had tortured her by burning her clit nipples, and tongue with a blowtorch. Something that more or less matched up with the accounts Russ had previously given. The witness went further, though, saying that Alan had found it funny to keep her in the bath and to even have sex with her body after she passed away.
She'd urinate all over, but he come to say that she'd urinate all over because he kept her tied up while I'd go to work. And I just he thought that was funny. He kept her in the bathtub. He'd warm the body up and have sexual relations with it, or whatever you want to call it. That's just shit. I was like, geez, I wasn't trying to hear any of that. But
Later, when Alan again found himself incarcerated with the same man who had passed this information on to police, he sexually assaulted him, which led this man describing Alan as a monster during his testimony. In the end, Alan entered a plea of no contest in the case, and after a lengthy process of psychiatric evaluation and appeals, he was sentenced to 39 to 60 years for second-degree homicide, 2 to 5 years for attempted dismemberment and mutilation of a body, and 38 months to 5 years for attempted third-degree criminal sexual conduct. The last of these was related to the witness who passed information on to the police, and this part of his sentence is to be served consecutively with the murder charge. However, Alan never confessed to the murder, so we will probably never know with any certainty the true details of what happened to Kelly Jean Warner at the hands of Alan, or how much she suffered. But if even a small amount of consolation exists for those who knew KJ, it's that Wade Allen will almost certainly spend the rest of his life behind bars for what he did to her.